name is Robert Perry. I'm here today in Thousand Oaks, California, at the home of William John Hurley. I'm interviewing Mr. Hurley for the Veterans History Project. Mr. Hurley served honorably in the United States Army during the Vietnam War. Mr. Hurley attended William and Mary College, was enrolled in ROTC, and graduated with a commission in the U.S. Army. He served in combat in Vietnam and received the Bronze Star, among other combat decorations, achieving the rank of captain. He separated from active service in 1969, and in 1970 resigned his commission in order to become an FBI agent. During this distinguished 30-year career with the FBI, Mr. Hurley worked counterintelligence and counterterrorism assignments. On behalf of the Conejo Valley chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, it's my honor to interview you, Mr. Hurley, concerning your service in the U.S. Army and with the FBI. Our videographer today is Mr. Ed Lynch. Okay, Bill, when and where were you born?
I was born in Weymouth, Massachusetts, December 23rd, 1942.
Okay, and what were your parents' names?
My parents were Harry L. Hurley and Mabel Hurley, born Henley.
What were their occupations?
My dad was a common laborer, had a variety of jobs, welder, truck driver. My mother was a registered nurse.
Okay. And did you grow up in Weymouth?
Yes.
Did you go to high school there?
I went to high school at the Weymouth High School, and then stayed in town until I left for college.
When did you graduate from Weymouth High School?
1960.
Okay. Did you have any particular interests or sports or anything? We played student council, anything like that?
I was a wannabe football player, but I wasn't any good at it, so they let me run. I had a kickoff in football that somebody missed the kicker, and I recovered my own kickoff, and the track coach saw that. And that was the start of my track career.
So you were a track man?
I was.
What did you run?
Quarter mile in high school. College, I ran quarter, indoor 600, and various relays.
It's a tough race. I happen to know that. I was on a track team in high school myself. So, okay, so you graduated in June 1960, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what happened next?
I went to a Huntington Preparatory School in Boston for a one-year school. I was on the track team there as the co-captain, and we went to the White Stadium to the Penn Relays, and I had a pretty good race there. We were defending national champions, and I took the baton in 10th out of 10th place and pulled out a silver medal. And the William and Mary coach, where I eventually went to school, saw that, and that led to my getting in there.
Did you get a scholarship for track?
No.
Okay.
They didn't have the money for a scholarship for track athletes at that time, other than the really hot runners. I wound up being state champion in Virginia for 4 years in the 440, and 3 out of 4 years in the indoor 600. I looked over my shoulder at the wrong time one time and didn't qualify.
Okay, so after you left Huntington Prep in Boston, then you went to William and Mary for 4 years, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, now what was your major there?
I majored in physical education.
Okay. Any outside interests?
Track, ROTC. I belonged to the Sigma Phi Epsilon social fraternity, and my wife-to-be at that time, we were married between our junior and senior year, my junior and senior year.
Fantastic. Okay. So, let me see, you were in Army ROTC for
Yes.
4 years? And that led to you graduating as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, correct?
Yes.
Now, it's unusual, I noted when we chatted on Monday that you actually had a commission in the regular Army. That's unusual for ROTC. How about telling me how that came about?
Well, between my junior and senior year, I went to a summer camp at Indiantown Gap. I figured it's not going to be a lot of fun, so I just went to enjoy myself. I had a really good time and apparently did quite well, because I wound up being the top student from William and Mary, which got me a Distinguished Military Graduate designation and allowed me to get a regular Army commission rather than reserve.
Right, so you were reserve second lieutenant for what, 3 days? And then
I think 3 days, and then my RA commission came through.
Okay, now what were the advantages of being regular Army second lieutenant?
This would give me a little advance notice on and preference on assignments, both to branch, to theater or country. When it came down to choosing, I said I would like armored cavalry, and they said, no, you got to choose a major branch, which was armor. So I said armor, parenthesis, armored cavalry, which I got. And they said, well, where do you want to go? And I said, if I can, I'd like to go to Germany. No, you got to pick a theater. So I said, okay, Europe, parenthesis, Germany, and that's where I wound up going.
Okay, but first you had to go to Armor Basic School.
Yes.
Is that correct? Now, where was that?
That was at Fort Knox, Kentucky. I went there. When I first got there, they didn't know what to do with me, so I helped train Laotian soldiers for about a week and I had no training before my actual Armor Basics started.
So that was just like a pool that
Yes.
you were in for a week. So that must have been interesting. What were those Laotians like? Could you communicate with them okay?
They had interpreters because I don't speak their language.
Nobody does. Okay, except Laotians. Well, what were they like?
They were good soldiers. They were eager to learn. They had the basics of their army, but we had the technology and the advanced tactics that they didn't have.
Okay.
And as usual, when you're in the military, your sergeants make things happen for you.
Right. Now, were you glad to move on to class there in armor?
Yes.
Yeah, I figured you probably would be. Okay, so 6 months of that. What was that like?
6 months.
Was it 6 months in armor, or what was the school?
It was an armor officer basic, and I went there first. And
How long was that?
I don't remember. It
I
was.
think the basics is usually about 6 months, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so you did 6 months of that. What was that like?
It was interesting. I was, of course, not used to the tanks. When we got our ROTC training, we didn't have the tanks, mainly infantry. And my basic branch was armor, which will figure in later on to the story.
So, as it turns out, we just found out that you were in armor basic school for about 4 months. Is
Yes.
that correct? Okay. And then where'd you go from there?
Well, back on schooling, when I was in ROTC, as the brigade executive officer, I went to West Point for 3 or 4 days as part of an exchange program. And the man in the center was my roommate, Scott Ferguson, who was the brigade commander.
Okay. So that's right. You were the executive officer of your
Yes.
brigade in ROTC. That's important. So I'm glad you included that. Okay. So once you were done with Armor Basic School, what was your next assignment?
Went to Fort Benning to go through a jump school, which is a 3-week course to get my basic qualification as an airborne soldier.
Okay. So you got your jump wings, right?
Yes.
How many jumps did you make there?
5.
5 jumps. Okay. What was your first jump like?
Kind of scary. It was a C-119. The doors open on the back there, and then, all the guys were talking, and all of a sudden it got very quiet, and the temperature changed, and all of a sudden we got the hand commands to go ahead and stand up, hook up, and make our initial jump.
Was there any
Then it was
hesitation jumping out of that thing?
You don't have a chance. It's just bing, bang, bang. You don't even think about it. That's what
The
you
guy
train.
in front of you is going, the guy behind you
train
is
to
going to go,
react.
and you're just going, right? You're just
and
with the
you're going.
flow. Yeah.
And then it gets remarkably quiet. The plane has moved out of the area, and it's just very, very quiet. All of a sudden, your training kicks in, and you're looking up, checking for holes in the chute, and start looking for the drop zone, making your slippage to get where you need to go.
Okay, so all that training that you had just kicks in, and your mind just
Automatic.
starts clicking, right? Yeah.
They
Okay.
train you to just go right through the procedure without even thinking. It's automatic.
So your jump school was what, 5 weeks? Did you say, or
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Okay, and then from where did you go after that?
And from jump school, I was assigned to go to Germany, to the 2nd Armored Cavalry in Germany, which is where I really wanted to go. And I went over there with my wife, and we had our first child born there. John was born in Nuremberg, and that was the beginning of my assignment. We spent a little over 2 years there along the East German boundary with West Germany and the Czech border with West Germany and the trizonal point. We were the cavalry screen for USArmy.
Mm-hmm. Just right in the height of the Cold War, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 1966, right? This was when this
Yes.
was. Yeah. Okay. A little tense over there on that front line, wasn't it? Okay, so you were in Germany for how long with that assignment?
2 years, 2 months, and some odd days, and then the drawdown for Vietnam hit. When I got there, we had a full complement of our cavalry squadron, which is about 1,000 men,
Okay,
And-
now in Germany, you were a platoon leader and intelligence officer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You see, in that assignment for how long? About 2 years?
About 2 years.
Okay. All right. Before you went to Vietnam, did you attend a school in January 1968?
Went to several schools in Germany, in Oberammergau. Went to nuclear weapons target analyst and small unit armored cavalry leader, which of course fit right in on the job I had.
Right, I mean, once you left Germany, did you go to a school before you went to Vietnam?
Jungle warfare school in Panama prior to going to Vietnam.
Yeah, School of the Americas, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In
You became
Ger-
jumbo expert qualified there?
Got to back up a little
Yeah,
bit
sure.
for Germany. A cavalry unit is a reconnaissance unit that is called an economy of force unit. We had armor, infantry, artillery, and scouts, which scouts most people don't have. So as an economy of force unit, we aggressed against major units, brigade, division size things with our smaller unit, because we were able to shoot, move, and communicate very quickly. And as such, we could cover the front of one of the American units as an enemy aggressor unit. So if I wasn't at the border looking at the Russians or the East Germans or the Czechs, we were out aggressing against other Americans
Okay, see.
to test their capabilities.
You were the bad guys in the
We were the bad
maneuvers,
guys.
yeah. All right. Was that fun?
It was.
I imagine it would be. Okay, now jungle expert qualified, and that would have been what, in January 1968. How long did that jungle school last?
It was about a week and a half, 2 weeks. We were trained by special forces in the jungle, doing operations ostensibly against them. We had an escape and evasion course that initially had to go from point A to point B, and there was a Navy unit that was there ahead of us, and they asked, what do we have to do? And they said, get from point A to point B in the jungle. How are we supposed to do that? And they said, any way you can. So they decked the sergeant, stole his Jeep, and drove around. Well, they said any way you can. That eliminated any Article 15s or court martials there. But by the time we came along, you go from point A to point B. However, you got to get to meet a partisan in the middle of the jungle. And he doesn't speak English, and he'll tell you where point B is. So we got through the jungle and got to him. Luckily, our guy spoke Spanish, and I had, at the time, a working knowledge of Spanish. Was able to muddle through and find out where point B was, and we got there. But we had very good training down in Panama, and it really prepared us for Vietnam.
Now, when did you ship out for Vietnam?
Just before Tet of 1968.
Okay.
And
were you there for Tet, or
no,
you came in behind it? Huh?
came in behind it, and remember now, I got this armor, infantry, artillery, and recon training. So when I got to the replacement depot, where I was assigned to the 101st Airborne, they said, oh, you're not going there. You're going to the 173rd Airborne. And I said, what? Change of orders. Okay, when I got to the 173rd and on K, they looked at my file, and by now I'd had a lot of training up against the Russians on the border in various types of units, armor, infantry, artillery. And they said, you can go anywhere you want to go in the brigade. And they said, okay, you have a cavalry unit there. They said, except there. And I said, why? That's a West Point slot, and it's commanded by a major. Okay, and that's when they assigned me to become the S2 Air, in charge of aerial intelligence operations for the brigade.
Okay, that's the 173rd Airborne
Yes.
Brigade, correct? And Key. Okay, so, oh, by the way, did you go over as an individual? Or did you go over as a unit?
Individual.
Individual, I thought so. Okay, so then you were assigned when you got there.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so then you got to on Key, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And you're in S2 Intelligence as the air officer, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how long did that last?
Almost 6 months. During that time, I was planning aerial intelligence operations involving a variety of things, whether it was photographic, visual reconnaissance, side-look airborne radar, infrared, and a airborne personnel chemical detector we call Snoopy. Now, Snoopy was a, excuse me, at that time classified device that was a scoop on the front of a Huey, and he'd fly in a little fleet. The sniff ship was down low, sometimes below treetop level, and he would detect phosphates and sweat and other things from Viet Cong trying to hide in the jungles.
Urine, for example, sniff that out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, they are flying down so low they can't see where they're going as they're going around corners and up riverbeds. So the chase ship where I flew was behind them several hundred meters and above the tree level. And behind us was a pair of gunships, Huey gunships, and behind them were a pair of OH-6A light observation helicopters that had miniguns. And above it all was either a naval gunfire officer or an Air Force air liaison officer who had control of all the stuff that they had at their access.
Sounds interesting. Once you were done with that assignment, what was the next thing you did?
During that, during that assignment, I was pulled out and went down to Dalat to a task force, a joint American ARVN task force called Task Force South. We had two of everything. 2 commanders, 2 executive officers, 2 intelligence officers, and I was the intel officer for that. And this is the patch indicating Task Force South with the American flag on one side, the Vietnamese flag on the other. And this is the ARVN Eagle, and the sword was from our 173rd Airborne Brigade.
This is a campaign that you were involved in. Then,
It was
right?
a campaign.
Yeah. How long did it last?
We were there several months. This will be my counterpart, Lieutenant Ming. As I said, we had 2 of everything, the American intel officer and the Viet. This is our headquarters there, and they have some mortar holes in the roof there, so we were under attack quite a bit. But our reason for being there was that a unit of the 101st Airborne went in to get a hold of some North Vietnamese around the Dalat area coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail area.
Yes.
And they were attacked and almost wiped out. So being airborne soldiers, they said, we can handle this, and they sent an entire airborne company in from the 101st, and they almost got wiped out. So then the command took notice, and they brought in an entire battalion from the 101st, the 173rd and the 82nd, along with other units that supported us. We had helicopters, we had the sniff ship, we had Air Force Arclight, B-52 strikes, and we went in force and cleaned up that area.
I imagine that took care of it.
It did, and by the time we were through, I went back to my brigade, and I was about 6 months into my Vietnam tour, and they decided at this time to put me in a combat slot. Now comes the cavalry unit. At this time, they were ready for a change. They had downgraded from a major to a captain, but he was a West Pointer that was in charge of this, and he was due for his rotation. They looked around, saw that I had all the recon experience, so I was put in charge or commanding the E-Troop 17th Cavalry of the 173rd.
Okay.
The interesting part there is that by this time they'd taken the 82nd and the 101st off of airborne status and made them air mobile, all helicopter borne. So I wound up commanding the only airborne cavalry troop in all of Vietnam at that time, because they'd already taken the 2 major divisions off.
Okay. So, how long were you, oh, by the way, did you go to Landing Zone English in Bong Song when were you doing that?
Yes.
Okay. And is that where you were stationed during that time with the cavalry?
Yes, the brigade area was at An Khe, but the forward area was at Bong Son at Landing Zone English.
What were your living conditions like at Landing Zone English? Do you have any pictures?
Yes, I do. Get down some of these. This is the light observation helicopter that was part of that sniff mission. These would be the call sign Flipper was the transport helicopters. And working my way down towards Bong Son here, but this is the Bong Son Pass, with a constricted area right in the middle that was always being ambushed.
Is this in the 2 Corps?
Yes.
Okay.
And we had one of my platoons was assigned there, and another one at the Bong Son Bridge to protect that. And this is what one of my cavalry patrols looked like. If you've ever seen Rat Patrol on in the Korean War, the only major difference here is we have the upgraded Jeeps and we have M60 machine guns instead of the old 30 caliber. But we have recoilless rifles, we have the machine guns, both the M60 and the M2 50 caliber, 81 millimeter mortar, and 2 recoilless rifles. And anybody with any ounce of sense would not shoot at this group.
I wouldn't expect too many guerrillas would want to take you on unless they had really overwhelming forces. You know,
Well, we had one individual try, and he fired from a rice paddy, and they swung the recoilless rifle around, and it had what's called a flechette dart. There's about 300 of them in a warhead, and they can set the burst on that anywhere between muzzle blast and up to about 300 meters. So he's about 150 meters out. They set it for 100, fired, and when we went out there, his hands were pinned to the stock of the weapon.
Yeah. Okay, so, do you have any pictures of what your camp looked like there at Bong?
This is the Bong Swan Bridge itself. It goes over the Song On Lo, or the On Lo River. It's a major bridge on Highway 1, which is a major north-south route going through Vietnam along the coast. And it's critical that that bridge not be knocked out. The 1st Cav held that bridge with a reinforced rifle company. When they moved out of sector and we moved in, we did it with 1 armored cavalry platoon.
Okay.
They attacked us the first night, and we had massive firepower, and they would only snipe at it after that. They wouldn't attack it. The bridge wasn't very wide. The picture isn't very good, but you can see a tank trying to cross that bridge, and there's only inches on either side of it.
Right. You could make it, but it was close.
Living in the area around the bridge, we had bunkers at the end of each end of the bridge. This is my platoon sergeant Ron Reagan from the 1st platoon with a captured Viet Cong flag. And if you look at the bunkers, I know the camera can't really see it, but the bunkers are here, and out to the side is cyclone fencing,
Okay.
chain link fence. And the reason that's there is that when they attacked with B-40 rockets, they're point initiated and would detonate about 6 feet away from the bunker and dissipate most of the explosive charge before it hit the bunker.
Pretty smart.
So you use what you can deal with, and like I said, turn your sergeants loose and they'll make it happen for
You
you.
take any 140 millimeter rockets, or 120s, or 82 millimeter mortars?
Not at the bridge. We took mortar fire there, and swimmer sappers came in, and we tried. If we detected them, we'd throw concussion grenades as compared to fragmentation grenades, and just throw them in the water, and they'd blow out the eardrums and kill anybody that's trying to swim up and blow the bridge from there. This particular picture is also at the Bong Swan Bridge area. Is an armored 5-ton truck. It's I think the name of that one was the Widowmaker.
Any pictures of your housing? Trying to get an idea how you guys live day by day.
This is one of the Quonset huts. It's a canvas type structure. If you were lucky, they had some air conditioning in there, but it's mainly for the field grades.
So those are canvas Quonset huts?
Yes. Now the main type structure that we lived in were wooden structures built by the engineers, had canvas tops.
Standard hooches, we used to call them, yeah.
And we even had a 55-gallon drum out there with some water in it with heaters, so we can actually take a warm shower.
There was something like 20 by 40, I think, is what they were. You could put about 6 officers in there.
Daily we go out on road patrols, and occasionally we'd be attacked. You can see the gun jeep here is shooting across the river. Now, to this side of the jeep, we're pinned up against a hill, so they'd attack from across the river. So if we decided to go after them, we would have to go across the open, exposed area.
Right.
But we had the heavy weaponry there and could usually eliminate the thing.
Were mines a problem in that open field?
They were. And you can see the condition of some of the roads there as we're going down the highway. And this is the road between Highway 1 and the Hatai Special Forces Camp.
Looks like Mudville.
We had to clear every day. And one day we pulled off the road, A little kid came out and he says, "Dawei, Captain, you no go here, VC come, plant mines." This is an improvised explosive device that we almost drove over, and the kid probably saved my life. It's 2 high explosive American artillery rounds wired together with American WD-1 communications wire, indigenous bamboo wood to separate the 2 contact points, which happen to be American sea ration can lids, powered by American batteries our guys threw away.
Yeah, that looks nasty.
So when the boy told us it was out there, we got the mine detectors out, which we carried on road patrol, and we were able to find that. And here's my Jeep with the explosion in the background of that particular round.
Okay.
Not all of our forays out on the road were successful. This is one of our fuel trucks from my troop. And one of the Jeeps that we lost several soldiers on.
I see.
And another picture at landing zone uplift, which was one of our intermediary points of one of the platoons getting set to go out along the road.
So what were your, what was the weather like there?
Hot, very humid, and when we arrived in country and they cracked the door in the plane, you could smell the dark, dank, oppressive odor, and the heat just permeated the whole plane, and it never got any better. It rained a lot. We'd be out on some patrols or ambushes, and it rained so hard you couldn't see you'd have your weapon out, aimed down toward the ambush site, and you couldn't even see the sight in front of your weapon.
Right.
It would rain that hard.
So you take a shower and the dirt would actually roll off and you could see it go down the drain, right? Yeah. Okay. So, did you stay with the 17th Cavalry at Bong, Swan until the end of your Vietnam tour?
Yes.
And when was that? When did you actually rotate home?
I believe it was February of '69. A little more on while we were there is my wife sent me a little Christmas tree and has a little miniature train running around it in a crash and a picture of my dad. When I was assigned to go to Vietnam, he had a artificial joint in his leg that got infected during an operation, and they knew he was going to lose the leg, but they didn't tell me.
Okay.
And the way I got told was they sent letters from home, and they were supposed to go on. Remember, I was going to go to the 101st. Well, I went there first, and by the time they caught up on me, they were going to break it to me gently. Well, Dad's seeing a surgeon, and there's a possibility of an operation in there. And the next one say, well, he's scheduled for the operation, and then he's had it, and then there's some problems. First letter I got was, don't worry about the amputation. So the letters didn't get there in the order they were supposed to have come. But that was Christmas that year. This was a marker panel. Now, you were helicopter pilots, so you may recognize the orange and red marker panels we used to mark.
We used smoke a lot. We didn't use those things that much, but
Well,
they were around.
The Viet Cong would monitor our transmissions, and the pilot would say, pop smoke, and we'd throw out a green, and he'd say, I got a violet and a yellow.
That happened to me.
That's not us.
That happened to me.
So
We had green smoke and yellow smoke. So I said, pop your smoke. I said, Roger, green smoke? He said, negative, yellow smoke. I said, I'm in hot on the green smoke.
this marker panel was captured back from the Viet Cong, who obviously got it in the combat operation and made it into a child's jacket.
Oh.
And the USO came over. I almost got in trouble when Bob Hope came. I sent so many soldiers down with a gun jeep escort, because we had the gun jeeps, and trucks, because we had some of the trucks. And I put most of my soldiers on at the point the first sergeant and I were out in the boondocks guarding the green line for fear we'd get attacked, because most of my guys were gone. Then Jimmy Stewart came. This is a picture of Jimmy Stewart and his wife and me greeting them to our cavalry troop area.
Were they pretty nice?
They were very nice. He's a brigadier general.
I heard that, the Air Force, right?
And this is a picture of an indigenous water wheel made totally of bamboo to raise water up from the river into the rice paddies. And some of the young ladies that were tending water buffalo along the road leading into our area.
Right.
Sometimes they were doing that, sometimes they were taking other things.
Okay, so Now you're rotating home in December of 1969, is
Yes.
that correct? Okay. Now, when you got home, did you have any leave at home in the States or anything
Yes.
like that? Okay. What was that like? So you had some leave when you got home?
Yes.
Well, what was it like when you got home there in February of 1969 back in the States? What did you notice about
The politics of the war was such that it was not a popular war among the citizenry or a lot of the GIs. And when we came back, they tried to get us to come back in civilian clothes, but we walked, talked, and looked like GIs no matter what we wore. So some of the people at the airport were saying, "Here come the baby killers," or "How many women and children did you kill this year?"
You actually heard that stuff, didn't
Yes. And it really affected me.
you? In what way? Tell me how that felt.
Well, we're going over trying to, save America for freedom and save the Viets, and we were sent there to do a job, and we get blamed for it, not the politicians. I'm glad to see that in Afghan and Syrian and Iraqi situations now that they're welcoming the GIs back. It wasn't that way for us, and when I got home, I put most of my military hardware in a box, and it's up in the attic somewhere. I've never even looked back.
Okay, so
I only talk about stuff like this to other GIs. It took the DAR a long time to get me to even do this.
right. So you just put this all away in a box, and you put it
Yes.
all away in the back of your mind too at the same time, right? And then that was just something that was a part of your life that you just separated your mind from for many, many years. Is that correct? Yeah.
I think one of the first times it came up was one of my outside activities is the Boy Scouts, and I led a rock climb up a Joshua tree for 21 years until I had a shoulder accident and artificial shoulder, and I couldn't climb anymore. And we were up in Joshua Tree one day, and one of the assistant scoutmasters, Jack Talbot, looked at me, and I was wearing a fatigue jacket, and I had my 173rd Airborne patch on there, and he looked at that, and he said, "When were you in the Thundering Herd?" And that's a very inside term.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's the Sky Soldiers, as they're known. But Thundering Herd is something only someone in the brigade would know. I said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, I was there. When were you there?" And I said, "68. And he said, "So was I. I flew for the 61st Assault Helicopter Company in support of you guys." And we started talking, and I had a booklet at home that had tail numbers of the aircraft that I had flown in, and for either combat missions or just the Snoopy missions. Turns out Jack had flown me, and we were to the west of Bong one time, and we got pinned down pretty heavily, and turns out he was one of the pilots that got us out of there.
Wow. That's interesting.
So we've been friends ever since.
Now, when you got back to the States, it doesn't sound like you were welcomed very warmly by the citizenry of our country at that time.
Just family and friends.
Right. So what was the next assignment that you had in the Army?
I went to Fort Carson, Colorado, where I became the headquarters commandant of the only armored battalion in an all-infantry post. Now this kind of figures into one of the things that bothered me about my Army assignment. Remember, I was Armor Branch. When I went to Vietnam, I commanded all infantry guys. 141 at one point. Every one of them was awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge, and they wouldn't give it to me because I had the wrong collar brass. Now, if you look on my DD-214, I went to an Armor Infantry Infusion program listed at Fort Benning there, infantry retrain. But that apparently wasn't good enough in combat experience to be awarded the CIB. When I got this plaque that my men presented to me in Vietnam with my executive officer, John Phillips, it's got the CIB on there, but that's what the men did, not what the Army did.
Okay.
So that's kind of always bothered me.
So you were at Fort Carson for how long?
Until I separated from the Army in,
It's December 1969, wasn't
yeah, I
it?
think it was.
Yeah. I think that says that on your DD 214. So, and was that more or less a desk job, or what was that like there?
Quite a bit, because I had cooks, radio operators, truck drivers, everybody in the headquarters and headquarters company. And when I got there, it had the highest desertion rate at Fort Carson, so that kind of presented a command problem for me. And I was able to talk with a lot of the men and turn it around, so by the time I left there, I had the highest re-enlistment rate.
Very good. Good. So you separated from active duty in December 1969. I noticed you have quite a bit of combat decorations here on your DD 214. You want to talk about any of those?
Not particularly. They're up in the box. I've got a Bronze Star with 2 oak leaf clusters and Air Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters are the key ones, and I can't even find them. They went up in that box, and they're up there somewhere.
How is it that you were awarded the Bronze Star?
For combat operations, and I went out. I was a hands-on guy in Vietnam. I went out with my troops, and we got in several sticky situations, one of which I thought I was going to go to jail. We had a pilot that was downed, and having the quick reaction force and the capability to move down the roads quickly, they called on Cav to go get him. Well, it was after curfew, and we got to the roadblock, and a young private says, "Sorry, Captain, I can't let you out of here." I says, "Get out of the way, I got a downed pilot." He says, "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't let you through." And I turned to my machine gunner and says, "If he doesn't move, kill him." And the kid's eyes get about that wide and waved us on through.
No, those were MPs, right?
No, these were soldiers from our unit that were on a roadblock, that were...
They're acting as MPs,
Yeah.
though, right?
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm in deep trouble. We got our pilot back and all was forgiven.
Absolutely. If you hadn't got him back, it might have been different. See, that's the thing. Yeah.
Another interesting one we had was, got a call from Rice Twigs Charlie when I was in the S2 Air Ops. And I didn't recognize the call sign. I went to the code books, looked it up, couldn't find it. So I went to the Air Force. "This one of your guys?" "Nope." Where's the Navy lieutenant and the Marines from the Anglico gunfire team?" Well, they went out and found them, brought him back, and Lieutenant Buconics came back in wearing a towel around him and hair wet, and he's got the rubber sandals on. He says, "What's this about onrush?" I'm sorry, it was, that's a different story, but about onrush was the battleship was coming down to refuel, and he wanted targets, so we gave him targets. But back to the Rice Twigs, that was a Navy Swift boat. And I checked the coordinates. He's about 2 kilometers inland. And I called back and says, "Verify your coordinates." He says, "Yeah, we gave you the right coordinates. We're up the river and the tide went out. Can you come help us?" So he's tipped over on his side like that. Now his guns and everything, mortar and all his machine guns are pointed up in the air. And he's very vulnerable.
Right.
So we just surrounded him until he got
Till the tide came up?
and
Yeah.
back out.
Yeah, to give a little security out there. Okay, a few things I forgot to cover. When you were in Vietnam, how did you communicate with home? I mean, it certainly didn't have any computers back then, so...
Mainly by letter. My dad and I sent, I had a small reel tape recorder, and we could send verbal communications back, but with my family it was by letter. In fact, I got most of my letters up in that box.
FPO San Francisco, right?
Mark it free for the franking and send it on.
Yeah.
One time when I was at Task Force South, I got a call and over the radio telephone. He says, "Is this Captain Hurley?" "Yes." "OF 103-375. And I said, "Yes." "Who's calling?" "This is the Red Cross." "Oh, why are you calling?" "Well, you've been reported killed in action." I had no idea what they're talking about. So I assured them I was well and went back to my job. About 15 minutes later, my boss, Major Stang, the S2 himself, calls, says, "Hurley, what the hell's going on there? We got a call, you've been reported killed, and your wife is making inquiry." I said, "Sorry, Major, I'm very much alive." And he says, "You get your butt down to Phuket, get on a Mars radio affiliate, because I know your wife's 8 months pregnant, and you let her know you're all right."
Now, was she actually notified that you were dead?
Mary? She was not notified per se, because she knew that that's not how they announce a death. She said if a chaplain and a sergeant showed up, I'd have believed it. But
or, in your case, an officer, probably. Yeah.
in this case, she got a phone call and said that Captain Hurley is reported as of 0800 to duty, and she said, "Well, isn't that what he's supposed to do?" And they said, well, yes, but he'd been reported killed, and we're not sure what's going on here. At any rate, I flew to Phuket. I got put a request in for a Red Cross presence on a Mars radio call, because they would have to go from a military radio to various shortwave stations to get back to near Gettysburg where she was living.
Right.
And then I went over to the O Club and waited, and then I went to get some sleep. Next thing I know, the crew chief's waking me up and says, sir, it's time to leave. And I said, haven't got my call yet. Let me run over to the Radio Shack. Well, there's a new guy on duty. He knew nothing about it. But he says, but the conditions are right for this call right now. Let me try once. And he got through. So I would say, hello, Mary, this is Bill. I'm giving you a call. I need to talk to you over. And then go through the various stages of the shortwave things, and then she would answer. And with the, over with the transmission, it'd go back and forth. Call lasted maybe, 5 minutes, Mary?
Yes.
And that was the bit of excitement for that communication back home. She was always a little jealous because President Johnson's daughter would get on Air Force communications and talk directly to her husband in the States.
Yeah, a little RHIP there.
Yep.
What, do you have any off-duty recreation or anything like that you guys did there? Anything in Vietnam? Yeah, while you were out there,
No,
out there in the bush, you probably didn't have any time off,
Didn't
right?
really have much time off. As I said, we had the USO come in, and we had opportunity to send some of the troops down. I never went because I wanted to make sure my men got out and got that. And the USO is a wonderful organization. They've done a lot for the soldiers and sailors and airmen there, and but I never got to go myself.
Did you get any R&R?
I did get an R&R. My R&R was in Hawaii. Mary and our son John flew over to Hawaii, and she brought him. By now, okay. By now, we had a daughter born, and she was 6 months old before I came back from Vietnam.
Yes.
And I went up, hugged John and Mary, and daughter pushed me away. Well, little baby, she's never seen me before. This big stranger,
A stranger to her, yeah. Big
intervening in her life there, and
yeah. So it took a little while.
Took a little while.
Yeah, for her to cozy up to you.
we got along fine.
Right. Okay. So you had a R&R in Hawaii then with your
Yes.
family. Okay, and that was what right about in the middle of your tour there.
Just right between the first 6 months, the second 6 months. They were pretty good about that.
Okay. Okay. Once you were out of the Army, what happened next? I mean, did you go right into your next
No,
pursuit in life, or?
I went back to Littlestown, Pennsylvania, which is near Gettysburg, where my wife and children were living. And I tried to get into both the CIA and the FBI, but I was given bad information on the agency that all of my military time would not count toward retirement. That turned out to be erroneous, but I didn't know that at the time. So I requested to join the FBI and put all my eggs in one basket. In the meantime, I had to get a job, so I went to work in an iron foundry as a squeeze molder. And
What does a squeeze molder do?
they spend the morning they have forms they fill with sand and put a template in between, for instance, shut-off valves for a 4-inch shut-off valve for water, which I made thousands of, and then put the sand on top, compact it, and then lay it out on the floor. Then in the afternoon, they pour molten metal into the mold to create the end object.
So this is honest labor, but it's still manual labor for a
That's when I
college
decided
graduate.
manual labor was not a wide receiver at some school in California. And this was not for me.
Right. How long did you do that?
Several months until my appointment came through for the FBI. That was kind of interesting because I did not know that J. Edgar Hoover was on the National Board of Directors of the Boy Scouts of America. So they sent me about a 5-page questionnaire to go into my entire background and do a security check on me. The very first question was, were you ever a Boy Scout, and if so, what rank did you attain? That blew my mind, but I was able to say Eagle Scout.
Extraordinary. 1%, I think, of the Boy Scouts at that time were Eagle Scouts.
And proud to say that both of our sons were Eagles.
Great.
The youngest one just became a scoutmaster.
Now, before we move on to your next career, did you develop any friendships overseas that carried on into the future?
Yes, there were two main ones. I've already mentioned Jack Talbot, who lives in Thousand Oaks here, and we're still in communication. And Butch Chabity, Carl Harry Chabity, was a lieutenant that went through Armor Basic with me, and we didn't really know each other then, but we did go to jump school together, and we struck up a conversation and eventual friendship right there on the runway as we waited for the fog to lift so we'd get on board the jump aircraft and do our qualification jumps. And we flew over in the same plane to Vietnam. We reported for the 101st Airborne, and that's where they separated us, and I went to the 173rd, he went to the 1st Cav. And we didn't see each other till we left Vietnam. We flew home in the same plane.
Wow.
And we've maintained contact ever since. Whenever I get back to Virginia, we visit he and Penny and in their home in Southern Virginia, and we've been friends all this time.
That's great. That's almost a 50-year friendship.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've contacted a few of my enlisted guys that I'm in email touch with Sergeant Reagan, who was in the picture with the Viet Cong flag.
Right.
I called my first sergeant one time, tracked him down. He doesn't have email, but I got a phone number for him and talked to him. He's an American Indian, and he's living in the western United States. And, I've been in email contact with one of my machine gunners who found me online and maintained a little contact with Mike McBride.
Internet's wonderful for that sort of thing.
Yes, it is. John Slope was my first sergeant.
Right.
He was one mean son of a gun. I swear he test jumped the first parachute. He was a real character. He just ran that troop with an iron fist. When I first took over the troop, he came in, he said, "Sir, I'm your first sergeant. How are you going to run this troop?" I said, "Top, I'm not going to run it. I'm going to command it. You're going to run it and keep my butt out of trouble." He says, "That's all I want to know, sir."
All right. That worked out just fine, I
It
imagine.
did.
All right. Now, when you first got started with the FBI, I mean, obviously you took all the tests, and then they eventually got you an appointment, and you went to the FBI Academy in Quantico. Is that
Yes,
correct?
14 weeks training
14
there.
weeks training. What was that like?
It was pretty intensive. We got a lot of firearms. We got a lot of things about writing reports, because you never know where your reports are going to go. They could go over the president's desk, so we've been very heavily into that, into law. One of the ways you can get in the FBI as a lawyer, I was not a lawyer, but we were responsible for the legal aspects of the case. And we had support from the U.S. Attorney to do the legal stuff on it. But when I got to L.A., I found I was writing the affidavits for a search warrant or arrest for the new AUSAs.
Right.
They, of course, put the final stamp of approval on it, but we do the writing on it. And we lived in the old academy at the time, which was right on Quantico, in some of the old buildings. We went to school in the old post office in Washington, D.C., and to the identification division, learning how to do and take fingerprints and how to classify them, and basically do most of the jobs that we would be working with support personnel doing. We had to know. One of the areas I thought was kind of weak was developing informants. They just kind of did a little on-the-job training when you got in the field on that, and I got to be very good at it, and most of my commendations in the Bureau are for developing assets in the foreign counterintelligence field.
I see. Okay, so you went 14 months to the academy. What kind of weapons did you learn to fire there?
A little bit of everything. We had 38, which we carried. Eventually,
4-inch 38 or
4-inch 38, and the old Thompson submachine gun, which we never used, and we familiarized with it at Quantico and never used it again. We had Remington 308 rifles and 12-gauge shotguns, basic weaponry.
probably 870s, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you graduated from the FBI Academy. How did you rank in your graduation? Were you up towards the top, middle, bottom? What?
I don't think we ever ranked it.
They didn't rank
But one interesting thing we talked about Monday was when we showed up at the old post office. They brought us in to swear us in. They came in and said, "Okay, how many of you guys are in the military reserves?" About 3 or 4 guys raised their hands and said, "Step outside and resign your commissions or don't come back in."
And you were one of those 4, right?
No, I wasn't. I had a reserve commission, but I was in the inactive reserve, so I couldn't be called up. That was one of the kickers. As an FBI agent, you can't be called up to a military job.
Right.
And the other thing is we investigate some of the military.
Right.
So that's a
So you were one of the
conflict
ones that had to resign your commission then?
No, I kept my reserve commission, but it was only applied to active duty, active reservists that would attend meetings and be
So you were
subject
able to
call.
keep,
I was able to keep it
I
until
misunderstood, thought you had to resign it.
mine stayed inactive until my permanent captain came in, and then my resignation went through.
And how long after was that?
Several years.
Oh, wow.
But I never attended any reserve meetings.
Okay. So what was your first assignment with the FBI?
I was assigned to the Seattle field office of the FBI, and I was there several months. And we got a call one day from the special agent in charge reassigning me to the Vancouver, Washington resident agency, a two-man office. So I called my wife, and we were still trying to get housing then and get our children in school. And I said, have you put John in school yet? And she said, no. I said, don't. We're moving. Hoover liked to move you at the end of a year, at the end of 2 to 3 years, at the end of 3 to 5 years. At the end of a year, I was gone. I came to LA, and then he died, so I'm still here.
All right. So tell me some of the stuff that you did up there in Washington State.
I worked some bank robberies, general criminal work. We had 5 squads there, and I was on the fugitive squad. And going back to my Army days, I'm proud to say the first arrest I made was an Army deserter.
Right. Was it mostly deserters that you were tracking on the fugitive portion?
Some were, but some were under the fugitive deserter statute. Others were unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, or substantive violations like bank robberies that were fugitives that we go after.
Right, right. Did you actually have any hot bank robberies that you rolled on?
Before I even got into permanent housing or even sent for my wife, I was in temporary motel quarters on Mercer Island, and there was a bank robbery over in Spokane. I said, I think that's on the other side of the state. And they said, yeah, you and Dick Ottstadt get cars and head over there. Well, we're the 2 new guys. All the heavies flew over. Well, we stopped midway in central Washington at a sheriff's office where they thought this guy was, and by then they located him way over on the eastern side of the state. So we just checked in at 4 o'clock in the morning and continued on driving, and wound up executing a search warrant and an arrest warrant on the subject there. And I got to search in the trailer home he was in after we had arrested him on the road coming out of the trailer park. And I found a purse there, and I looked in it, and there was a note, put in 50s and 100s till you see me. And it had a note with the Lacey Bail Bonding Company and his lawyer's name. This is in his wife's purse. Well, when I got to testify in the trial, they said, you said you found this in Mrs. Lehman's purse. Which Mrs. Lehman was it? And I said, it was his wife. Well, how do you know? Well, I had a driver's license. And she said, that's my purse, keep out of it. And it was his wife, not his mother. Oh. Well, we eventually, on those 2 notes, wound up convicting not only the bank robber, but the bondsman and the lawyer for obscuring the origin of stolen federal funds. So we got 3 convictions on that one.
That was your first real case, wasn't it?
That's the first one I worked.
Yeah, you always remember your first one. Okay, so then you got down to L.A. after about a year.
Yes.
You were assigned to, what, the West L.A. office? Okay, so... You ready to go? All right. So you're assigned to the LA office down there in West LA?
Yes.
How long were you there?
I was there several years. I've been there since 1971, but I was there 4 or 5 years. Then they put me out in the San Fernando Valley at the Tarzana Resident Agency, and I spent time out there. And then they closed that office, and I was brought back into headquarters, but I continued to work all of the foreign counterintelligence and counterterrorism matters in Ventura County until they closed Santa Barbara, cost savings, and the agent there retired. So I worked everything from Santa Barbara through the San Fernando Valley, and one agent was injured in Lancaster, so I got out there and covered that whole area, all of the foreign counterintelligence stuff.
Right, and that was both out of West LA and the satellite offices that you just spoke about, right?
Yes.
This was counterintelligence, counterterrorism, both foreign and domestic, right?
Yes.
Are you able to say anything about any of that stuff that you were doing there? Was all that classified?
It was all classified. I better not go into that one either. Even though it came out in the paper, it was a large computer case that involved the defense industry, and the Russians had gotten into certain defense contractors through purchasing of a mathematical algorithm that was allowed by Commerce and got into secure areas that the Russians were thought to be able to backdoor into or get in and put malware that shouldn't be there.
Which was not allowed.
Which was not allowed. And I was the case agent on that, and that covered a large number of defense contractors and became quite a case. We were able to do a neutralization on that because the company involved initially had told the systems administrator, put the software in, make it work, and don't bother me with details. Took the intent out of the espionage statute.
Wow. Did you do any foreign travel while you were doing all this?
No, our procedure is to get the case here. If it covers a lead in Boston, I would send a communication to the Boston office and give them the bare facts on it.
I mean overseas travel.
Not overseas, no.
No overseas.
I did travel in that computer case because it had not been filed computer-wise. It was all paper files at the time that happened. And I had all the stuff up in my head, and then I had an accident that I wound up getting an artificial shoulder in with nerve damage. And
were you still on the job with the FBI then?
Yes.
Wow.
And they sent me to another state to interview the principals, the American principals that are involved in that company, because the company was American-owned, but it had 19 Russian computer engineers as part of it.
Okay. So while all this is going on, you're raising a family, right?
Yes.
Tell me about your family.
They're my rock. They were there for me in the military. They're really our whole reason for being, and the support I got from my wife and family, got me through the whole military thing, has supported me throughout the FBI, and I just can't say enough about my family. We had 2 boys and a daughter, and have 5 lovely grandchildren, and we spend a lot of our time traveling now after retirement in support of the family, to be with them and enjoy it.
Right. Now, your son, John, right?
John is the oldest, yes.
John, what does he do?
He is one of the vice presidents of Specified Technologies Incorporated out of New Jersey. He lives in Washington State, and he's married to Katie Schmidt, Hurley, and they have 2 children. They have a daughter, Caroline, who we're going to visit in about 7 days because she's being confirmed, and a son, Will. And about 50 minutes away, living in Bonnie Lake, is our son, Richard, and his wife, Monica, and our oldest grandchild, Olivia, and her brother, Jonathan.
Okay. Now, what about your daughter, Ann?
Ann passed away in 2013 from a brain aneurysm very suddenly. She was a flight attendant for American Airlines for 22 years and was still actively employed, although she died off the job.
Was she married at the time?
She was married to Jim Obot, and they had, at the time, a 3-year-old son, Connor. He had just turned 3.
Okay. That's one of your grandchildren, then, right? Okay. Quite a family. Quite an accomplishment. Let me see.
Both Mary and I, after retirement, my wife and I decided to do things like genealogy, something we can both do, because when we do something, we usually do it as a pair. You get one of us, you get both of us. So it was very important to both of us to do a family thing, because family is extremely important to us.
Right.
When I was in Germany, when we went to the officers club, we were presented with a mug. And this mug is the evolution of armored cavalry. On the front is Colonel Twiggs, the first colonel of the regiment. And we are a separate regiment. We don't belong to any division. We're separate. And the color guard of the dragoons, which cavalrymen are at that time called dragoons. And they have on one side the Rough Rider era, and the other side is Old Bill. Old Bill is the stereotypical cavalryman, the white cavalry hat, the yellow scarf, the John Wayne look, sitting on a horseback with his rifle slung over his saddle. And then evolving into the tank, the older tank, and then the modern day tank. These were presented to each officer when they came in. And it has Lieutenant William J. Hurley, and the unit in the 2nd Cavalry was presented to us when we went there. When we left the unit, this was presented to us to take home. It's a memento of our service there.
Fantastic. Now, you already talked about the fellow veterans that you stayed in contact over the years. When you got back from Vietnam, did you have any trouble with readjusting to civilian life? Or, I mean, you went to the FBI, that wasn't too civilian, so maybe...
I still remember my interview with the assistant special agent in charge in Denver, and apparently he hadn't read my file too carefully because I just come from Vietnam within 6 months. And well, Agent Hurley, Mr. Hurley, I wasn't an agent yet, he said, "We carry weapons as part of our job there, and sometimes things get pretty violent. Do you think you could shoot somebody if you had to?" I said, "I think so."
Did you tell him what you did?
He obviously hadn't read the file.
Right. You might want to have him brush up on that a little bit.
Speaking
of course, you were trying to get a job.
Speaking of coming back, in my hometown of Weymouth, Massachusetts, they're very big on veterans there, and they support them. They have since the Revolutionary War, and they have a Veterans Memorial that has bronze plaques with all of the veterans from the town of Weymouth right through the Vietnam War and probably beyond. This is the Vietnam plaque that my name is on. I'm pointing to it, and it's...
That's you on there.
That's me. And it's on the other side as you...
That's a close-up, yeah.
Close-up of where my name is. Luckily, there's no star beside it. That means you didn't make it back.
All right.
So I feel blessed to have gotten through there with no scratches.
Right. Imagine you got close a few times, huh?
Yes.
You want to talk about any of that?
Closest I came on something like that was a grenade went off and just barely nicked the front of my lip. Purple Heart, right? I went down to Company B Med to get the bleeding stopped because your ears and lips bleed like stuck pigs. And I walked in, and Company B Medical, and this guy's out in the corridor in gurneys, you know, with the limbs blown off. One guy's got half his stomach out, and a very tired medic looked up at me and says, "Can I help you, Captain?" I said, "Keep up the good work." I left. Those are the real heroes.
Right, I know. So, how did your wartime experiences affect your life?
It's one of those things that you're glad you did, but you never want to do again. It's something my country asked me to do, and I went and I did it, and I enjoyed the military, including combat experience. It wasn't all bad. We had a lot of good times there too. My problem with that was that I had tried to branch transfer. Remember, I had that problem with the armor branch, and I liked intelligence work, so I tried to branch transfer out of armor into military intelligence because I had a lot of experience at it in schooling, and I got turned down. I knew it was a calculated risk when I put the request in because I was on that flame trail going up there because of the Distinguished Military Graduate and the prime assignments that I had had, and I was destined for bigger and better things in the military, I think, but taking that calculated risk, it didn't work. I knew I had to get out.
Okay.
So then I went to work for the FBI and wound up doing intelligence work anyway.
What are some of the life lessons you learned from military service?
Be on time is one thing. I think my wife will tell you I really like to be on time for things, because when you're in a combat situation and the artillery says, "We're going to decimate this area at exactly 1300, don't be there," you don't want to be there.
Right.
And that I think has affected me both on the job and personally throughout my life there. Also, in the military, I don't think we had as much trouble with race relations there because we didn't look at guys, are you black or Mexican or white or what? You're a soldier. And your life depends on that individual. And you don't look in the foxhole next to you and see who's there. Oh, gee, I got a minority guy there. I'm going to have to watch that side. You know you can trust him. And airborne types, like Marines, are a special breed. And they think in a way that you can depend on your fellow soldiers. And at least when I was in, that's the way it was. It was a trust issue, and it was something you could depend on your training to react, like jumping out of an airplane. You go through the jump commands and you jump. You don't even think about it.
Right, we only had one color in the Marine Corps, that was green.
Absolutely.
Same,
But
same in the Army, right?
that lasted throughout the Bureau. You know, I got into the Bureau at the time, it was all male agents, but you knew you could trust them, and they're very heavily military. A lot of, very many of them served in the military, and quite a number were pilots. So when things came out like the skyjackings and they said, oh, we want to infiltrate agents into crews of aircraft during hijackings, who is a pilot? Half the hands went up. Okay, let's narrow it down. How many are jet qualified? How many rotary wing? How many fixed wing prop? And it narrowed it down. When I got up to Wounded Knee in 1973, from the occupation up there, it's a big, wide open area, no place to hide. So they gave us armored personnel carriers to hide in, just to protect us. Okay, who can drive these things? A bunch of us were armor qualified and knew how to drive and maintain them.
So you were in on Wounded Knee, huh?
I was.
You want to tell us anything about that?
I spent something like 13 weeks up there. I drove from LA. We knew we wouldn't have cars, so we drove LA cars up there. We chose them carefully because we knew they probably wouldn't come back. And got up there, we had 6 roadblocks surrounding Wounded Knee, which is a long linear village. And most of the activity is really on that line, so we put roadblocks out. They had U.S. Marshals on 3 of the roadblocks and FBI on the other 3. We had asked for military, but they have this posse comitatus thing. You can't use military for law enforcement purposes, so we had to do it with Marshals and us.
You ended up taking the place?
They surrendered, supposedly. They came out, and I got to count some of the weapons coming out, and they were firing at us with AK-47s. I know they had 3 of them down there. You know, I'd never forget that sound. And when they came out, they had bows and arrows, knives, some old World War II Japanese ammunition, and things like that they surrendered and laughed all away. They had shot one U.S. Marshal and paralyzed him, and when they came out of Wounded Knee, they had Mark Lane, the lawyer, and one of the subjects that we wanted was under his lawyer's control. And when we searched the car, they had some things that would have fit into an arrest, and we told the operations center we're going to arrest both the lawyer and the subject. And they said, hold on. Well, they had a Department of Justice lawyer on the scene, not U.S. attorney. And they said, let them go and give them their stuff back. As I recall, it was a formula for a firebomb that they had, a self-igniting firebomb. And I had to give that back to the attorney. About 10 minutes later, they came back. You still got that stuff? Go ahead and arrest him. I said, you told me, and I have initials on it, to give the stuff back to him. So I went up to the attorney. Yeah, I'd like that stuff back. He said, what stuff?
Oh, okay.
But we...
That's what happens when politics gets involved.
Yes, exactly.
In law enforcement, right?
Well, we had six roadblocks, and we were not allowed to patrol in between them. You know, common sense says you secure the area and you seal it off completely, but they wouldn't let us do it. And that's as close as they ever came that I saw at that time to a revolt in the FBI. They said, okay, you're putting up flares that's making the Indians nervous. Don't fire flares at night. Well, now we can't see. So the marshals would fire and we wouldn't. Then they came up with a ridiculous statement. Okay, somebody might get hurt. Don't shoot at the Indians under any circumstances. We said, we're not going to do this. If they're shooting at us, we're going to shoot back. Well, you can't do that. Okay, we're going home. You can't do that. What are you going to do, send me to New York? And they said, wait a minute. And they came back, well, The lawyers say, okay, if you're shot at, you can return fire to the point of origin and post off fire enough to suppress fire. Okay, we can work with that, but don't tell us we can't defend ourselves.
Right. So how did it feel being in combat again in 1973? Because that's what that was.
Very, very strange.
Hello?
Well, what about these guys?
I had no problem shooting at Viet Cong or North Vietnamese, but shooting at Americans was really a weird feeling.
Native Americans, yeah.
Native Americans or their supporters who are down in 70.
Really. Well, if you got in a shootout with a bank robber, you'd shoot at him, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
So this is more or less the same thing.
Same thing, and I was in the SLA shootout down in Los Angeles where the Patty Hearst group was in that building that burned down. I was right across the street from that. We had a lot of lessons learned on that. We couldn't communicate by radio with the sheriffs and the police, and they had all kinds of police agencies there. We were using M79 grenade gas rounds, and they were using flight rights, and of course they weren't compatible. And we had 38s, and they had 9 millimeters, so we've changed a lot of procedure based on that one operation there.
Right.
The fire department came rolling in because the building was on fire, and we had been taking fire within like 60 seconds of that time, so we had to run out of our hiding places, get the firemen down behind the truck, and basically let the building burn.
Well, thank you for sharing a few war stories from the FBI. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And what message would you like to leave for future generations? Wait a minute, before we even ask that, how'd your military service impact your feelings about war and military in general?
We're never going to get rid of wars, and I think they ought to send the politicians over instead of the soldiers, and we'd have a lot fewer problems.
It makes sense to me.
But
Or their kids.
if you
Put their
call,
kids over there, and then there might be a change.
I felt a lot different about me being sent over than I would my children or grandchildren. I would not want them to have to go, but then I don't think I would support them if they deserted or refused to go.
Right, I understand. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
Well, if my grandchildren are beyond or looking at this, I hope you get a better feeling for what I went through, and I hope that you never have to go. But if you do, serve proudly. As far as my feeling on the country is, I'm glad they did a turnaround on the way they treated soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guardsmen coming back from literally the sandbox, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and they welcomed them back. We weren't.
That's right, dude. I think the country learned a hard lesson from Vietnam with that. Is there anything you feel we haven't discussed that should be added to this interview? If so, what?
I think it's important to say that we missed out on a lot of things while we were serving overseas. Things like births, marriages, deaths, birthdays, anniversaries, things that most people take for granted. The sporting events of children, proms, and things like that. I missed out on the birth of the first 2 children, John in Germany while I was serving in the Grafenwehr firing range. In Ann's birth, I was unable to be with Mary in Littlestown, Pennsylvania. She gave birth in the driveway of the doctor's office. I don't think my sister-in-law has ever forgiven me for that. And then Richard was the only one that was born while I was home, and the doctor told me to wait in the waiting room and she'd call me, and then came out and said, "Would you like to know what you had?" So I missed all 3. When I see another veteran such as you, I always say, "Welcome home, brother." Because I will welcome another veteran home.
Well, welcome home, brother. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. I sincerely appreciate it. And on behalf of the Canal Valley chapter of the DAR, they say the same.
Thank you.